Hi guys, Mr. Howe here, and as you can see, we are starting off lesson 8A, crafting an AP argument essay. So this is our final unit on argumentation for the year, and now we're focusing exclusively on the writing of that argumentation essay. Obviously, everything we've done beforehand has prepared us for this, and so you can't say that we haven't been talking about crafting an AP argument essay. But now we're getting a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of it and the writing itself, as opposed to all of the rhetoric stuff that, yes, we should be using and we should be considering and we should be employing in those situations. But this is a little bit more direct towards, okay, what are some strategies that we can use to just write this? So this is crafting an AP argument essay. Okay, so let's dive into this and see what kind of sense of it we can make, guys. So first and foremost, arguments start with opinions, but they don't end there. Okay, and that's something to keep in mind. An opinion must be translated into a position, which first must be a claim, not just a statement of fact. And second, that claim has to be supported by evidence. Whew, there's a whole lot of stuff embedded within there that are worth mentioning. Okay, so first off, yes, you're going to have an opinion, but an opinion itself isn't going to make that essay. You need to know what your position on that opinion personally is. Where do you agree, disagree, why? There's another important reason. To what extent? All of those are things that need to know, and they're going to be generating for you that concept of the claim or multiple claims that you're going to be able to support specifically with that evidence. Okay. Now, hopefully, this is all stuff that is making kind of common sense at this point. But it's important that we keep that in mind, because if you're writing this argument essay and it's literally just an opinion, A, it's going to be ineffective, and B, it's not a good one. Okay. So you need to make sure that it's, you've got this argument, an argument that's influenced by your position on an opinion that has sub-claims to back it up and the evidence to support those claims. So keep that in mind as you're getting into this. It's not just well, as I would, call it a persuasive essay, which is essentially just a rant. Okay. So what does the argumentation essay expect you to do? Well, it expects you to do the following. Take a definite position, and I'm going to pause there for a moment because I get a lot of students who sometimes when they're writing argumentative writing, they like to be a little bit wishy-washy and say, well, it's not completely good and it's not completely bad. It's both good and bad. That's not going to cut it, okay? I understand that it might have pros. I understand that it might also have cons, but you need to take a definite position. You can't be wishy-washy, okay? No one should question where you stand on the topic. And we do kind of question that if you say, well, it's kind of good and kind of bad and kind of nice and kind of evil. No, it's not going to work. Don't do it, okay? Take a definite position. Be bold, okay? Go out on a limb to the best of your ability and convince us of something that we might not already believe, okay? Develop an argument that builds and moves forward instead of simply repeating the same point several times in different ways. This is, one of those things that's really frustrating for me as a teacher when I see it in writing by students, particularly my lower level students, because they won't really know what to do with their argument, okay? They'll say, well, I'm proving this thing, and so all I can do is just really repeat that thesis over and over and over again in different words, in different ways, different diction, different syntax, and hope and pray that if I've repeated it enough times, the osmosis is going to click in and people are going to automatically agree with me. That's not how this works, okay? You need to have ingredients that help to make that argument unavoidably accurate, okay? In a way that we can't help but agree with you. Okay, so that means the evidence, that means the commentary, that means the claims, that means the lines of reasoning and all of that business. Again, not just repeating the thesis or some other notion again and again and again. Your argument essay should support the points in your argument with evidence drawn from your own knowledge, reading experiences, and observations. And that's really the interesting thing about this essay in particular, because unlike both of those other AP essays for the AP Lang test, this one does not have a text as the basis. You essentially are given free rein. It almost looks like there's something wrong with the test page on the AP test because the prompt is so gosh darn short. There's so little to it. But look at that as a good thing. your evidence is your knowledge, your reading, your experiences, your observations, all of the stuff that you bring to the table. You're just trying to convince us of it, okay? But you need to remember that you have that knowledge, reading, experiences, and observations. You need to find that evidence embedded within your brain and put it onto the paper, okay? And if you're not actively trying to find that evidence in your brain, well, that's when you end up accidentally doing, this B up here, where you're just repeating the same point several times in different ways. No, get that evidence, your knowledge, your reading, your experiences, your observations, okay? And of course, don't forget to explain how your evidence supports your argument, okay? This means good commentary for that evidence. This means establishing those lines of reasoning that connect the evidence back to the claims and the claims back to the thesis, and so on and so forth. So you want to make sure that all of that is very obvious and visible. Those are what the graders are going to be looking for when the time comes, okay? If you're describing your own experience or observation in the argument essay, you can use first-person narration. So this is an important thing to keep in mind because we've talked about sort of that slippery slope of point of view in the past, but this is really the biggest situation where you're almost granted free rein to use a little bit more first person. Because remember, you don't have sources, you don't have research. All of your evidence is already in your brain. And if you can't talk about your knowledge, reading experiences, and observations with using the first person, then it's almost like you don't even have evidence in the first place. So this is the essay more than any other one where, yeah, first person is going to be something that you can use. So remember that, okay? Consider both the pros and the cons of your position by acknowledging counter-arguments. And that's going to be one of those great tools to making sure that you are closer and closer and closer to achieving sophistication as well. Make sure you're providing those counter arguments for us so that we know what the pros and cons of your position are. It helps us to see that you understand the complexity of your argument. And it's also, remember, going to build your ethos as well as logos in a manner that makes us more likely to find you believable and your argument agreeable. Okay, so make sure that you're addressing those counter arguments. Okay. We've got some questions that you should be asking yourself about the prompt in particular. What facts do you know about the topic? That's a great first step as you're just taking a look at that prompt and trying to figure out what to do with it. What do you already know about it? I mean, chances are it's not going to be a topic that you know nothing about. They're going to give you a topic that you at least have some sort of information on, that every person on the planet has at least a little bit of background on, particularly people of your demographic, because remember, they know your rhetorical situation as well. So just maybe make a list of things of what do you know about this topic, okay? What values are you aware of relating to the topic? The good about the topic, the bad about the topic, the stuff that is worthwhile, the stuff that is worthless, the stuff that is makes sense and doesn't make sense as far as you're concerned in that particular context. So again, we're just trying to come up with a good thesis at this point in time. These are things that you're asking yourself about that original prompt, especially if you find yourself sort of blindsided by it and don't know what it is that you want to write about. What policies exist or should exist relating to the topic, okay? So again, this is very future focused as we've intended to be during the course of this entire class. Hopefully being very future focused. Well, what policies, do exist now, but what policies should exist in the future? And maybe some of those policies already do exist and you want to preserve them, but also maybe you want to change them, okay? That future-focused rhetoric is going to make for a better thesis than your past-focused rhetoric if the prompt allows for it, of course, all right? So all of this is building up towards that thesis that we should be creating. Of course, we've defined thesis before. There's no reason why we can't define it again. The overarching claim that clearly states the writer's position in a text. So what else can I say about that? There's nothing else I can say. I've beaten a dead horse on that subject. Now, we do talk about at this point the three types of theses, just to let you know some of that flexibility that you kind of have within the scope of your argumentation, okay? So there are three types of theses that we're going to address here. The first of which is the concept of a closed thesis, okay? This is a statement of the main idea of the argument that also previews the major points the writer intends to make. So we would assume that it's probably closed because Well, it's not allowing you any flexibility for what angles you're going to take moving forward. It's sort of prescribing the structure that you're going to have for this essay after you've written it, okay? So in that sense, it's closed, okay? You don't have any real artistic license to play around with things, unless you, of course, go back and revise your thesis, okay? Which is sometimes, you know, obviously, we've talked about before how it's a great tool to have at your disposal to make sure that your thesis itself suggests the structure of your essay. And if your thesis doesn't, at the very least, your introductory paragraph should, okay? It is going to limit the number of points that you can make. So think about a thesis that maybe says, I think this is true because of this reason, and this reason. You just listed 3 reasons. That limits the number of points you can make. Is that really what you want to do? Or do you not want to do that? Do you want to leave it open? Do you want to have more than 3 points? Keep that in mind as you're creating that thesis. It is, of course, best for shorter essays with few main points, which, you know, with only 50 minutes to write about it, might be the perfect thing for your argumentation essay when taking the AP Lang exam, okay? The second type of thesis would be the counter-argument thesis. This is the type of thesis statement that includes a brief counter-argument, usually qualified with although or but. So you might say something like, although some people believe that blah, 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 it would seem more likely that blah, 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 blah. Okay? So that it's a thesis that sort of has the counter-argument embedded within it. And my guess is that probably the best times to use this on this particular type of essay are presumably going to be implied already within the prompt. Especially if the prompt includes a quote that they want you to react to, and you're going to disagree with that. That's probably more likely where you're going to use that. But of course, you know, as with anything, rules are made to be broken in rhetoric. So if you feel like introducing that counter argument in your thesis is going to help you out, by all means, do it. Okay? Because as we know, introducing that counter argument weakens the opposition. You're stealing their thunder. Now they lose one of their arguments because you've already said it for them. So it's a great thing to do in that case. It makes your argument seem both stronger and more reasonable, because it's one that has considered the opposition. So that's a great situation to find yourself in. It may also create a seamless transition to more thorough concession and refutation of the counter-argument later in the argument. Okay? So keep that in mind. The fact that if you're going to be doing a full-fledged rebuttal later on, establishing that in the thesis is going to help you to suggest that structure for your essay much later on. So it's implying essay structure merely by the presentation of that counter-argument from the get-go. And so in body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, whatever, you go back and really pull that counter-argument apart. We're going to expect that because you've already introduced it in the thesis, okay? This thesis also enables the espousal of a middle ground position rather than an absolute support or rejection, which is okay sometimes. You know, I sort of presented this as, don't say, well, it's got good and bad qualities. No, maybe that's a bad way to think about middle ground. But middle ground in a good way could be something like, yes, I agree with this, but during these particular situations. Think about qualifications like that, where you're saying, I wholeheartedly endorse this under these circumstances, or I wholeheartedly reject this under these circumstances. That's what we mean by middle ground, okay? Not, well, there's some good and there's some bad. That's not what we're talking about, okay? And then lastly, of course, for the 3 types of theses, we've got an open thesis. A thesis that does not list all the points the writer intends to convey in the essay. Now, keep in mind, if you use an open thesis, there still needs to be some hint of how you're going to be structuring this essay. That's an important component of how this is all expected to work. We need to know that there is some sort of organizational principle embedded within your essay, because if there isn't, we're going to feel lost and uncertain and unclear about what you're going to be communicating to us. So you can have an open thesis and you can have an introduction that doesn't, you know, delineate each individual topic by name, but that still suggests the overall structure of your piece, okay? This is, of course, going to be better for longer essays with numerous main points, ones that you couldn't possibly enumerate in your thesis itself or in your introduction. Numerous main points in a closed thesis can be awkward and confusing. And I already mentioned that back up there when we were talking about the closed thesis, okay? All right, last two things then for this one. We've got an effective thesis requires proof or defense. Hopefully that's obvious. It is not a statement of fact, but an argument you are going to spend the rest of the essay developing with logical reasoning and evidence. Yeah, that's restating what we've talked about already, okay? It's not just a persuasive essay. It is an argumentative essay. And an argumentative essay isn't just you sharing your opinions. An argumentative essay is going to pull out the evidence, and it's going to explain that evidence. It's going to connect that evidence back to your topic sentences with your claims and your theses, and so on and so forth. So don't get into this, well, I don't have a text, so really it's just my opinion. And no, it's not just your opinion. It might be largely your experiences and memories and observations, but that's evidence, and make sure you're using that evidence. And then, of course, I assume it goes without saying, just make sure it addresses the prompt, please, okay? Double check to make sure. I would maybe look at this again once you're finished writing. Was I actually on prompt, or did I go off on a complete tangent that means nothing makes sense anymore? Okay, so that is the lesson on crafting an AP argument essay, our first little window into that. Obviously, we're going to get into more specifics in the future, but as always, if you happen to have any questions or concerns, please feel free to let me know, and I will see you shortly, guys.